The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Lining up, Adrian double, and here it comes. Kick, connects.
Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
Alright, so let me just preface this video by saying I am pretty annoyed because I recorded this episode. It came out really well. Had some really good, moments in the episode that just sounded, real natural and all that. And then as soon as I uploaded, the audio just didn't work well with me. My mic was not working well, so I'm here recording this on the phone, re-recording it all. But to get back into the mood and kind of just recreate what I was talking about in that video, first off, how good does it feel, Philly fans, to just hear that intro and realize that for the first time in 11 years, we are heading back to the playoffs. It brought me such joy to get that notification that the drought is over and that we're going to be making it to the playoffs for the first time in 11 years. And man, I know this is technically my first year really getting into MLB, and I haven't, covering it here and there, because it's kind of hard. I should have covered more games, but at the same time, sometimes it's just kind of hard because of the amount of games they have, and you're kind of just like, well, what game should I cover and what games have the most interest? But aside from that, also, when I was writing up the script for this video, I was going to start joking around about what's the over-under for the amount of games that Melvin Gordon has left as a Denver Bronco, because my goodness, was he just... Or not just in that game, but every other game, it's like, my goodness, he's just not been good. But then Javonte Williams went down, and it's not looking good for Denver. Speaking of things not looking good for franchises, what's everybody wearing for the Dolphins organization's downfall? Because my goodness, an absolute disgraceful handling of Tua's medical situation. Like, not only did you put him back in the game after a quote-unquote back injury, but then you have him play the next game on a short week, meaning 4 days. 4 days between the time that he had that back injury that he was in the concussion protocol for, and they only changed it to a back injury afterwards, but he was in concussion protocol. They can't go back on that. They said he was in concussion protocol. They put him back in this game, and my goodness, what a terrible, terrible incident. I just couldn't believe it. What happened. I can do a whole episode on this and just how angry it makes me. It's like we basically saw this man have a seizure on the field. It just felt so uneasy to watch. It was like when Luke Kuechly had that concussion against the Saints. It's like it just brought this feeling of unease to see a guy go down and then have that sort of reaction. It was just very uneasy and scary. And I'm just sending all the prayers I can in the world for Tua, man. I just feel so bad for him, man. And the NFL as a whole should be looking into this. The Dolphins organization should be ashamed of themselves. I had mentioned that, like imagine if Thursday night football games were still on television, but it doesn't even matter that much because pretty much everyone was talking about this. Even people I know who don't keep up with football were talking about it and asking about it, and if he suits up for any game in the coming weeks, the Dolphins should just be investigated even further, because I think they already ruled him out of this game, but if he even plays the next game, he should not be playing any game soon. And honestly, a lot of people are suggesting that he even sits out the season, which is pretty, like, it's very serious in a manner, and a lot of people look at it as unrealistic, but like, after an injury scared like that, man, like I can't stress it enough. If you go watch that video, it's just so scary to see. Like I said, the guy basically has a seizure on the field, on camera, and it's just like, oh my goodness. The Dolphins again should just be ashamed of themselves as a franchise. And I know people are gonna be like, oh well, Tua plays just as much of a part in it, but like, at the end of the day, every player is going to want to play through injury, but it's up to you as the medical team to be like, no. Like last season, someone should have stopped Baker Mayfield from playing through that shoulder injury, because look at how terribly he played, onto lighter subjects, the Colts are still frauds, but I'm going to talk a bit less about them because I don't want it to come back and bite me in case they actually make a turnaround by the time they play the Eagles. But like, at this point, a lot of people are probably like, man, what's your beef with the Colts? Every episode seems to open up with a segment of you calling them frauds, but it's like, I don't have beef with them. It's just I had higher expectations for them, and I was like, oh, it's going to be a real tough battle for my Eagles. And not only that, I have JT and Michael Pittman on my fantasy teams, and yet the Colts keep losing terribly. JT and Pittman are the reasons why I've been losing terribly. The Saints also lost, and another team that I thought would give my Eagles a tough battle later in the season, not looking like it. And it's like, why are you mentioning them? Well, they just happen to be 1-3. They're starting Andy Dalton now, and the Eagles currently have their first round pick, which at this point in the season is looking like it's the third overall pick, which there's still a full season left to play, obviously, but at this current moment in time, that is a top 3 pick, and the Eagles are undefeated, but yet have a top 3 pick. Things are looking well. Pittsburgh finally put in Kenny Pickett, and his first NFL throw was a pick. And I know I'm known for my predictions aging terribly, especially on the wrestling podcast edition, but I'm seriously doing a double take of my schedule predictions, and I'm just hoping that a lot of these games are like, oh, it's going to be a tough loss for the Eagles. It's like, I don't know. A lot of these teams are looking like they just don't know what they're doing, and it's like it's making me worried about the teams that I was writing off, and now I'm just like, oof, man. I wrote them off, but like, what if they actually what if they do better than the teams that I thought would give us, a run for our money? But let's get into the Jaguars versus Eagles game, shall we? That's what we're here for, Equal Tuesdays. What should we start with first? The first quarter and, how terrible the game was looking? The defense? Nah. I think let's start with right behind Lamar Jackson, the ultimate bag chaser in Miles Sanders. At the start of this season, I said that Miles Sanders is one of those guys that truly has to prove his worth. Prove he can stay healthy. Prove he can be the lead back in the committee. And well, in a game that was heavily going to rely on the run game due to weather, Miles Sanders was called upon and he delivered. 27 carries for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. Play after play, he was getting key yardage, making the right cuts, and like Shady in the snow, Sanders did not let the rain affect his performance. In total, the Eagles had 50 carries in the game with touchdowns from Jalen Hurts and Kenneth Gainwell to go along with Miles Sanders' monster game. As far as the passing game, it was decent for a rain game. Jalen Hurts had his first what are you doing type throw. He threw it to Zach Pascal in double coverage, and then the ball went off of Pascal's hands with a defender waiting right behind, and not only that, it goes back for 6, and everyone was just like, man, what type of throw was that? But aside from that terrible throw, Hurts was still pretty decent in the rain, 16 of 25 for 204 yards. A.J. Brown leading the receiving corps with 5 catches for 95 yards. Dallas Goedert, 5 catches for 72 yards. For the offense, I'd give the running backs and offensive line an A. With my Lotta missing, the O-line held up still and gave Miles Sanders arguably his best game. And it's kind of a trend we're noticing this season. I don't know if you've seen it. Week 1 was A.J. Brown's monster debut and best game as an Eagle so far. Week 2 was arguably Darius Slay's best game as an Eagle. Week 3 was Jalen Hurts' best game as an Eagle along with Devontae Smith. And now we have Miles Sanders this week, and so it's like you're looking forward to next week, and you're like, man, who's going to be the breakout next week? I'm calling either Dallas Goedert or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, one of those two, But there's 2 notable acquisitions that I didn't mention about having breakouts, and that's because while it hasn't been one game, they've truly been showing out throughout the season, if you want to say, but most notably in this game. Let's start with the defense, and let's start off obviously with that first quarter that I mentioned. Started 14-0, down 14-0. There was a pick 6 from Hurts, and then we let up a touchdown. But then the Eagles started coming back with their rushing attack, and mainly also because of their defense. Just like last game, Hassan Reddick is showing out as he finds his role in this defense. 4 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 sacks, and most notably, 2 forced fumbles and fumble recoveries from him. Absolute monster game. And all I talked about in previous episodes was, how Jonathan Gannon needs to figure out needs to, or not only needs to figure out where to play him, but needs to get it in his head what exactly Hassan Reddick's role is on this team and what we signed him for, and he's finally started doing that, and I'm giving him credit and I'm giving him his props because last season it was something he struggled with, but here he is adapting game by game and knowing where to play these guys now, and, it's been noticeable as, instead of playing him in coverage and stuff, we now have Hassan Reddick being more of that pass rusher that we brought him in, and look at how much of a difference it makes. Not only the 2 sacks, but 2 forced fumbles and recovering those fumbles as well. And then we have James Bradbury, who had an excellent pick on Trevor Lawrence. It is insane to me that the Giants cut this man due to their cap issues. And when it happened, most Giants fans were like, oh, he's washed anyways. But the man has played phenomenal so far across Darius Slay. And for the most part, Jacksonville's running backs and receivers were held in check with, 2 exceptions being one, James Agnew was going off for a decent game. It was pretty crazy to see. And then it's not really going off, but when you look at the stat sheet, you're like, oh, look, Christian Kirk had 60 yards, but then you look at it, it's like he only had 2 catches in that game and was pretty much unnoticeable other than that one big, 45-yard catch and then the other one. But other than that, that man was gone, and that was without Avonte Maddox being in the slot to cover him for most of that game. Just absolute monster game from the defense, and just really good overall. The defense completely took advantage after the first quarter, not being as, how do I want to put it, they kind of held them in check, and they were just forcing turnovers completely, and that allowed for the Eagles offense to pile on the points in the second quarter, as we've seen all season. And surprisingly, they scored in the fourth. Big shocker. Was it mainly field goals? Yes, but they're slowly improving it. Learning that, they can't keep letting their foot off the pedal in that second half. As we saw, it's like the Jaguars started to look like they were coming back. So they were like, oh, we got to start being more aggressive. We got to start being more aggressive and just doing our best to get, even if it's just field goals, just get points in the second half, to continue extending their leads, And the one thing I mentioned, was like, hey, look at how much we rattled Carson Wentz, even though he was playing super well before going against us. It was like, look at how well he's doing. We have to make him uncomfortable to stop this and all that. And then I said the same thing. I was like, man, I'm worried about Trevor Lawrence with the way he's playing. The Eagles are going to have to make him uncomfortable as they can, as uncomfortable as they possibly can, and just really force him to make bad throws or make bad plays and all that. And look how much it pays off, because Trevor Lawrence had 5 turnovers this game, the interception, and then 4 fumbles. That's all I said was make that man uncomfortable, and boy, was he uncomfortable in that pocket. There was times where he looked good, but most of the times there he was getting sacked and there he was dropping the ball. Trevor Lawrence was fumbling the ball like how I fumble my words when talking to a girl. But anyways, unlike my fantasy team, the Eagles continue to be successful against their toughest matchup so far and improved to 4-0. Next week, the Eagles travel to Arizona to play the Cardinals. The Cardinals do not have DeAndre Hopkins, but still pose a formidable threat. The defense is going to have to look to adapt to defending a dual-threat quarterback. Hurts and the rest of the offense are going to have to look and just seriously consider how to attack this Cardinals defense. That's the one thing they've been doing well, is looking, okay, is this team good against the pass? Is this team good against the rush? And then we form our gameplay around that, while also making sure not to give up on one or the other if one thing's not going. Like if the rushing game isn't there, they still at least try and get it going so they don't make their offense look one-dimensional. And the last thing I'll say, is that it is statistically proven that Kyler Murray underperforms anytime there is a double XP event in Call of Duty. Now, Overwatch 2 drops today. If Kyler underperforms, Cardinal fans, you are allowed to you are welcome to use that excuse if he underperforms. But with that being said, thank you all for joining for another episode of Game Day. As always, remember, many things in this life may seem impossible, but if you fight for your dreams will fight for you.